before I leave, I just wanted to touch on a couple other things we did. We visited Wadowice. Wadowice is the hometown of John Paul II. We didn't go into any buildings there, unfortunately. We met some we met some pilgrims from other countries while we were out there, and we met a group from I think it was Chile and a group from Italy. And yeah, so that was when we started to try to trade with people. We had bought like bags of buttons, World Youth Day buttons. I wish I had one. A World Youth Day button, and we were that said like Minnesota, USA. We're at World Youth Day, and a tradition at World Youth Day is that when you go to World Youth Day and you meet other pilgrims from different countries, you trade trinkets with them. So we had these buttons to trade, and I have a big collection of pins, pencils, pens. Some people started trading their World Youth Day shirt for a jersey from out of the country. I didn't do that. So it was pretty crazy. This bracelet actually is one of the things I traded for. It's from a Polish nun. I traded. I gave her a button, and this is what she decided to give me, which I was really touched by. She was a Polish nun who spoke French. None of us spoke French, or we were like a pack of 5 who were going around and trade with people. None of us spoke French. We tried, but anyways, we spoke with a Polish nun who spoke French. We communicated with her to some extent, and so everyone actually got these. I have another one that's blue, but I like this one better. So it says "Jesus, I trust in you" on the front. Here is the World Youth Day logo. It's kind of hard to see probably. And then here are 10 dots in case, 10, they're meant to be like rosary beads. So you could pray a decade of the rosary or a chaplet on it. Another thing we did is we visited a bunch of churches in Krakow had relics in them that were of saints that were flown in for the occasion. Relics being a piece of their body, a small piece of their body, I think. But anyway, so at St. Mark's, this was the church we went to in between seeing the Pope twice. The one I said I would come back to, here it is. St. Mark's was the church where St. Therese of Lisieux's relics were flown in. I'm not sure where they were flown in from, but they were flown in for World Youth Day. And St. Therese, I don't know if you know, but St. Therese has been really instrumental in my spiritual life. I'm a sort of a pessimistic. I tend to be pessimistic and worrisome. And St. Therese's message of trust and of being like a childlike and having hope and trust was really instrumental in my spiritual life. And so being able to kneel 7 feet away from St. Therese's relics was a powerful privilege for me. And I have the picture I have from that chapel is not very good, but I think it's definitely ranks in like the top 3 pictures I took, because you have St. Therese in the foreground. She's in that big kind of flowery chest. And then you have, she isn't in there, her relics are in there. And then you have Jesus in the background. He was exposed in the Blessed Sacrament. So you have like 2 of my favorite people in one picture, which was cool. So I saw the Pope 1 hour, St. Therese the next hour, and then the Pope again on my way back to the hotel. So that was a pretty good day. That was Wednesday. That was Wednesday. And so Wednesday was a pretty good day, but Thursday I think was even better, and I think Thursday was the best day of the trip for me, because we visited the Be Not Afraid Center of John Paul II and the International Basilica of Divine Mercy. This was Thursday, July 28th. The Be Not Afraid Center is really cool. It has, it's all about John Paul II, obviously, and one of my favorite quotes of all time is printed right above the doors in Latin. It says, "Do not be afraid, open wide the doors to Christ." So I guess that makes sense that it was printed above the doors. Also, inside there are tons of mosaics, huge mosaics, of all sorts of scenes from the life of Christ. And there's a relic of John Paul II's blood. There was the cassock that he was shot in, May 13th, 1981. I'm pretty sure it was the day he got shot in St. Peter's Square, and the cassock, the blood-stained cassock, is on display there. In fact, Jason Everett, who's a popular Catholic speaker, was in Poland for World Youth Day at the time, and he took a picture, he located the puncture of the bullet, and he took a close-up picture of the bullet. So I didn't look for it, but it was there, and it was like the actual cassock that the bullets pierced through, and it was that was pretty powerful. And downstairs, actually, I didn't go down there, but in the basement of this church, there was so a couple of the people from my group went down, and they actually shook hands with Pope John Paul II's butler. He was actually the one who caught the Pope after he was shot. So that the Pope was falling over after he was shot, and the butler caught him. And I'm sure there's only one of the incredible stories that this butler has to share. He's very old, obviously, but so that was really cool. So this place was the bomb. But I think the best part of the trip for me was the Divine Mercy Sanctuary, which is right across the street from St. Faustina's Convent. And I had the tremendous privilege of being able to pray in the same chapel where St. Faustina used to pray, where a saint used to pray, to receive communion, to receive visions, and to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet for the first time ever. So I have a picture up here that I pulled up from the internet. If you look on the left, there's the picture of there's the Divine Mercy image of Jesus with his right arm outstretched and the rays coming out from his heart. Underneath that is a white chest, and that's the tomb of St. Faustina, or at least it contains some of her relics. And in front of that, you can't see it, but in front of that there's a kneeler with another relic, another first-class relic. And the first thing I did was walk up and kneel down and venerate that relic. And then I went from there and I went to the communion rail on the right, like just to the right of the center is where I knelt down. And I prayed there, and it hit me there, one of the hardest I've ever been hit, that this is where a saint used to receive communion, and this is where a saint used to pray, you know. And that was really strong for me. And then I went over to the side, over to the right, far away, like not in the frame anymore. And I knelt down and I prayed the chaplet. Because how can't you? This is probably where the chaplet was given to St. Faustina, so it's not like you can go in there and not pray a chaplet. And then just look at the beauty of the picture, the beauty of the chapel. If I was St. Faustina, if I was living in this convent, that would be like when I would love that. I love that chapel. It's so beautiful. And then I had my confession heard, and which was another great way to kind of cap off the night. And I had my confession heard in the Basilica of Divine Mercy. This is a relatively recent. It's huge. I didn't really go into it much, but I had the chance to have my confession heard there and to pray there. Also, what we did before we went to confession, Father Tollefson asked if we could go check out the gift shop first because we didn't know when it was closing. So we were like, okay, and so we went to the gift shop, and it's really small. It's about the size of our kitchen, and then on the side there is a window into a reconstruction of the cell of Saint Faustina, or what it would have looked like. And so I took a panorama of it. You can kind of see everything. In there. There's a copy of her diary. There's I think her lamp, some whips and some hair shirts that she used for mortification to deny herself. And we were taking pictures, and this was 2 minutes before closing time. And so while we were taking pictures, a nun came in to straighten it up, and Father Tollefson, who, by the way, he's the pastor at St. Hubert's, and he came along with us. Father Tollefson was like, "Hey, we got a nun here." And the reconstruction is complete with a nun, and a Saint Faustina replica, The nun was a little surprised and embarrassed, but she was a good sport, and she let us take pictures of her. So that was funny. Anyway, another place we went to that was frankly a boss was the St. Stanislaus Church in Debniki. It was we didn't know it was there until we were looking for a mass to say on Monday when we arrived in Krakow. Before everything started, we had just arrived in Krakow and we were looking for a mass to say there. And we found St. Stanislaus Kostka. It wasn't very long. It was only a 10 to 15 minute walk away from our hotel. But it turned out that this was John Paul II's parish church growing up. On this way from his home in Wadowice to the communist rock quarries where he would work, he would stop in his church to pray. This is actually the church where he said one of his first masses. Also in this church is the cassock of Saint John Bosco. This is a church run by Salesians, which is the order that he founded. And it's also the tomb of Jan Tyranowski is there. Jan Tyranowski was the mentor of John Paul II, and they met at this church. Jan Tyranowski introduced John Paul II, or at the time, Karol Wojtyła, to Carmelite spirituality and really helped deepen his prayer life. And he's now been declared a servant of God by the church and is hopefully on his way to sainthood. And so I got to pray at his tomb, and that was really cool. We actually had 2 masses. We heard 2 masses there. The first one was with just our group, and the second one was on Friday, with all of the pilgrims in Minnesota. Both Archbishop Hebda and Bishop Cousins were out in Poland for World Youth Day, and so someone had the idea to get all the pilgrims from Minnesota together to say mass, and so our group joined it, and we said so that was really cool. We filled the church, and it was a pretty big church. We filled it up with pilgrims from Minnesota, plus a group from Florida, a group from Venezuela, a group from the Philippines. I think that was it. But anyway, so one more story about what happened in Poland. In our hotel in Krakow, we were there one of the first nights we were there, and we were just kind of chilling after the long day we had, and we suddenly heard an alarm go off, and it turned out, and then it was like a little ding dong, and then a voice started talking in Polish. The first words that came out of the speaker were "Uwaga, uwaga," and then it went on to describe something in Polish, and then it switched to English. And then that was when we found out that they supposedly discovered a hazard in the building, and they gave actually very vague instructions as to what to do, only to stop all activities. And they said don't use the elevators. And so Caleb and Noah and I were in this hotel room. Caleb and Noah room, and Caleb and I freaked out. I didn't have any thoughts as to what it could be. I just knew that we were at the very end of the hallway, and if like a fire came up or whatever, we would be trapped. And so Caleb and I immediately dropped everything we had and started bolting for the staircase. Caleb and I, we completely forgot about Noah. Noah apparently was preparing for a gunman if a gunman was going to come in, and he had a coffee pot ready, and he was hiding in the bathroom. So in case a gunman came, he would be ready to whack and to knock him unconscious with a coffee pot. So anyway, we bolted down the stairs, and there's a group starting to form. And meanwhile, this warning message is being repeated over and over at ear-splitting volume. Uwaga, uwaga. And then the warning message, and then the English message again, and it's all like blaring. It must have gone on for like 15 times. It blared. And we were down there, and we were in the lobby, and Matt Blake, our youth minister, is there having a beer with a couple other dads, and he's like, it's totally fine. He said it was a false alarm, actually. And it turned out later that one of the people in our group had gotten lost in the staircase. And the way it happened, the way the staircase was that once you got in, like, you couldn't open any doors. All the doors were locked from the staircase, which was really lame. And so I'm guessing that was the only door that was open, and it turned out to be emergency exit. But anyway, so we got the whole hotel up and running, and they played another message at the end and said the hazard has been removed and there is no longer any threat to your life. And we're like, yes!